We do not have the biggest brain of the mammal. We do not have the brains with the most neural cortex of the mammal kingdom. We do have proportionally the largest amount of prefrontal cortex to our brain than any other mammal. And it is the prefrontal cortex where higher executive cognitive consciousness is transmitted and come up in our brain. And so there's this constant tug of war between your prefrontal cortex and your limbic system, constantly. And in certain situations, if given either enough stimulus or if the prefrontal cortex is too fatigued, the limbic system will hijack the prefrontal cortex and turn it off. There's a circuit in there that if the inhibitory that the limbic system can inhibit the prefrontal cortex, and if it reaches a certain threshold, it gets to do whatever it wants. And we call that, it's called a lot of things, but my favorite is called the amygdala hijack. So the amygdala is one of the major neurocenters of the limbic system, and I love that term that's called the amygdala hijack because it just takes over. And in that case, you have very little, if any, prefrontal cortex or human. Again, remember that that's what makes us human. So human intellect or human consciousness trying to figure out what to do with this limbic impulse. That is minimized, if not completely absent. So you're giving yourself over to your primitive brain, and you are not going to be who you want to be, or you're not going to act like who you want to act. You are going to become very primitive.
Okay. What happens at that point? Like, as you become primitive, where do you go?
So that's going to be person and situational specific, but I can give some pretty tragic examples. There's videos out of mass shootings, for example, where somebody goes into a crowd or a school and they start pulling out some kind of firearm and just shooting. And what you see is really interesting is that half the people freeze. There's this person, even if they have the chance to run, right? If the shooter is facing away from them and there's a door 10 feet behind him, there will be a cohort or a section of those who freeze. They don't do anything. Their limbic system, that fear component of the limbic system, has basically been activated so much that it turns off that even the prefrontal cortex that says, hey dude, there's a shooter there, maybe you should turn around and leave. And they freeze and they don't move and they become victims. There's, you can take any aspect of a limbic system if you want. I like to call it the four F's, right? There's feeding, there's fighting, there's fornicating, and there's fear. We all know that, a good meaning husband works too hard and then goes to a bachelor party and is surrounded by all of this, whether it's where I'm going with this, just that primitive music, and then the alcohol flows, and then you've got all these beautiful women that just start saying limbic, limbic, limbic. And then he ends up doing something that he's going to regret for his whole life. And he wakes up the next morning and it's like, what did I do? Right? He was not himself. That's no excuse. But if he had been in control, if he had not let that limbic get a hold, he probably would not have acted that way. Road rage, right? We hear it all the time that otherwise healthy, functioning people just get pushed to the brink, and then they lose it. They start doing violent, rage-filled acts, and the people around them say, "I had no idea he had it in him." Well, it is in all of us. And so, how we react kind of depends on who we are and what the stimulus is and where we're at that time.